Welcome to the Three Questions webcast series. I'm Wayne Baxter, Executive Director with One Capital Management. At One Capital Management, we develop and implement strategies that enable our clients to grow, protect, and ultimately distribute their wealth. And we do that by offering investment wealth management services. Thank you for taking time to check us out. Now, my clients are often referred to as cross-border clients. Now, why is that? Well, it's because they're either U.S. or Canadian residents who invest in U.S. and or Canadian dollar denominated securities like stocks, bonds, or ETFs. Our process for advising our clients includes an in-depth discovery and diagnostic analysis of their wealth management goals and objectives. And as one would expect, that analysis will include a review of their estate planning strategy. Today, we're going to take a closer look at Canadian estate planning for U.S. citizens or residents who are considering a move to Canada. On this webcast, we'll be reviewing the three questions an American resident should ask before moving to Canada. Joining me is Rahul Sharma. Rahul is a partner with Fasken. It's a law firm that's been an industry leader in Canadian private client and private wealth sector for over a century. In addition, Fasken has over 800 lawyers based on 4 continents, none in the U.S. as of yet. Rahul is based in their Toronto, Ontario office, and he advises international and Canadian clients on a variety of tax, trust, and estate planning matters. Rahul is particularly experienced with cross-border and international trust and estate planning matters, as well as matters involving offshore or non-resident trusts with ties to Canada. Rahul, welcome to the Three Questions webcast. It's great to see you again.
Thanks so much, Wayne. Great to be here.
Raul and I have a little bit of history doing some webcasts together multiple times. I think we did one for the folks on the East Coast with a group in Boston, and we did another one for another group in the Bay Area. So this is becoming old hat for us. Before we get into the specifics of our three questions, let's first talk about estate planning in terms of the importance of it for Canadians, in particular, just Canadian residents. When should they seriously begin to think about or considering establishing estate planning? What are kind of the metrics or sort of the points where you say, now is the time for me to really seriously think about estate planning?
I think that happens, Wayne, when you have assets, and there's no measuring stick by which we say, okay, you have this many assets, so now you should be thinking about your estate planning. I think the moment you have assets, the moment you have a family, the moment you have a desire for these assets to succeed in a certain way after your passing, that's the moment that you have to really start thinking about your estate planning. Obviously, if you throw a border and assets on both sides into that mix, it gets a whole lot more complicated than that. But the moment you start accumulating wealth is the moment you really have to start thinking about your estate planning.
All right. So we can now just think, really want to focus on the three questions that we have for today. Really what I want to get down to is just really talking about the three questions. And we're going to focus on American residents. Now, it could be a Canadian citizen moving back to Canada or an American citizen looking to move to Canada for the first time. The first question we're going to attack is, does the province or territory I move to make a difference from an estate planning perspective? In other words, does it matter if I move to British Columbia, to Manitoba, Ontario, Nova Scotia? Does that have any relevance at all?
It does. It does. Canadian estate law, succession law, trust law, wills law is all provincial. While income tax law, for the most part, is national, except there are some nuances. For example, Quebec has a separate tax authority, a separate provincial tax authority. While for the most part, we have federal tax laws in effect generally on the income tax side across the country, on the succession and estate planning side, the province and territory does matter. So there are nuances between the laws in every province. And so you would want to consult, generally speaking, with a lawyer resident actually in that province or licensed to practice the laws of that province or familiar with the laws, succession and trust laws of that province to give you the best advice.
Okay, a lot of people who are living in the U.S. obviously already have what is often known as in the United States as a revocable trust. So the second question we'll take on is what do I do with my existing revocable trust here in the United States if I move to Canada?
Well, this is a perennial problem, and often when we see the issue, it's the person has already moved to Canada and already has spent some time in Canada as a Canadian tax resident. And often when this is discovered is when they go for the first time to file their Canadian tax return. And so they go and they meet with their CPA, the Canadian CPA for the first time. The CPA says, tell me everything. Tell me what you have. And sometimes it's discovered 4 years later. Well, what do you mean that accounts in a trust? We treat trusts as entities here in Canada for tax purposes, and we treat them as separate taxpayers for tax purposes as well. So notwithstanding this trust is revocable, it could, and generally would be categorized if the contributor of property of that trust is a resident of Canada. In fact, if the controlling party of that trust is you, Wayne, if it's your revocable trust and you move back up here to Canada, and you're the trustee and the sole trustee, very well that might be a factual resident of Canada and a trust that needs to file a Canadian tax return, or if someone else is controlling it for you, maybe a deemed resident of Canada that still needs to file a Canadian tax return and pay Canadian tax. And it's an easy problem for people to miss. I can tell you it happens all the time. And, this is why these kinds of webcasts and these kinds of questions are so important at the very onset. So get the help at the onset, before you're even planning the move, or before you actually move. And when you're planning the move, sit down with an advisor and talk through these questions. It's a really good question. The short answer is you may need to do some restructuring with that revocable trust. And, a lot of that might depend on what your plans are and what the tax situation looks like. So you do need to have the discussion, and you do need to do some thinking about that.
Okay, so I'm going to get to the third question now. This is a great answer, and thanks a lot. I think we should think of ahead now in terms of, the steps we make, and there's because their situations are different. Some people move to Canada. They move, like I say, for someone who's lived in the United States for 10, 15, 20 years, they decide they want to move back to Canada for good. But there can also be situations where someone may only be temporarily moving back to Canada. Maybe it's an American citizen who's moving to Canada because they got a job situation they want to take advantage of, but it's only for a short period of time. So, with that in mind, what steps should I take or consider if my plans are to remain in Canada for 5 years or less?
So Wayne, the devil sometimes is in the details, and the planning, has to be almost just right in these kinds of situations. When you're coming to Canada for fewer than 5 years, and you're bringing in assets with you into the Canadian tax system, which assets are going to remain untouched? Let's make it really simple and give a really simple example. You own a home in the Los Angeles area, and you decide, you're going to leave your home in Southern California as is, because you're going to move right back into it when you come back to when you come back to the United States from Canada. As long as you stay in Canada fewer than 5 years, different thing, there's different tax treatments in Canada for properties, principal residence exemptions and whatnot. But let's say for whatever reason that property would even be taxable on a capital gains basis. We're a capital gains based system. So if you leave, there's departure tax. What you want to do is set yourself up as best as possible to have as many assets as possible exempt from that departure tax liability on exit, as long as you stay fewer than 5 years in Canada. So that's an asset that you might be able to protect from the departure tax if you get your planning right. And comes back to what I said about 3 minutes ago. You need to start planning this from the onset. You need to start figuring these things out. And, the devil can be in the details, and you need to sit down with an advisor and hash those out.
One of the other questions, I know this is one of our three, but I'm going to throw it in there, is the planned move back to Canada. Obviously, there should be some, as you talked about the devil being in the details, the timing for creating a Canadian estate plan. So again, I'll use a hypothetical scenario where someone has been, a Canadian citizen, they've lived in the United States for a few years, they don't have any property in Canada other than the RSP accounts they left behind. Now they're moving back to Canada. Do they start working on their Canadian estate plan prior to moving back to Canada? Or should they wait until they get back into Canada and then talk to an attorney? Is that a relevant talking point for clients to consider? In other words, if you're moving back in 6 months, do you start talking to the attorney now, or do you wait until you get there to start that discussion?
I think the best answer is, if you know for a fact you're moving back and you're talking 6 months before moving back, do call the attorney. Do call a lawyer in Canada at that point. Do call the CPA in Canada at that point. Start setting up your network of support and advisors, because there are little things that you might never think about, and this is always the case. Think about it this way. That gives you enough time to figure out what you want to do with your revocable trust. It gives you enough time to figure out what you're going to be doing with your other accounts in the US and how you're going to be planning your assets on the move over. Leaving it to the last minute, you're probably not going to necessarily get the best solution and the most tax efficient solution for you. And then you need to think about how you're going to plan your estate. It's one thing if you're saying, look, I'm moving from here to there, easy enough. I want my Canadian plan to work. I want my US estate plan to work. I want to kind of keep a foot in both countries, which a lot of people do, by the way, as you know. You need this plan in Canada to talk to this plan in the States, ideally. And so that requires calibration. Might not require, it all depends. It might not require a tremendous amount, but the sooner you can get that dialogue started, the better off it'll be for you.
Which opens up possibly another topic for us to attack on another day, which is, the 3 questions Canadians or U.S. residents should ask if they own property in both countries. There's another kettle of fish that we could probably address in another webcast. Just thinking ahead a little bit. What the old saying goes, timing is everything. So for someone looking to relocate from the United States to Canada, putting a estate plan in place, we agreed that we should act in advance, right? For someone who's looking to move, they should not wait. But for someone who's looking for some assistance, what is the best way for them to reach you? Obviously, you're an expert, Rahul, and if someone says, I definitely want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Easy enough. I'm easy to find on the internet, on the Fasken website, and you can send me an email at rsharma@fasken.com, FASKEN.com. Ring me up. You can look me up on the website. Google is just as effective these days, and you can see all my contact details there. I really appreciate that, Wayne, and we try to make ourselves easy to get in touch with.
Well, Rahul, I really appreciate you again for participating in my 3 question webcast here. I look forward to having you on again. Today we had Rahul Sharma with Fasken join us. We talked about the 3 questions Canadians should ask, or pardon me, Canadian or U.S. residents should ask if they're relocating from the United States to Canada. And I did a great job again, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks so much, Wayne. Appreciate it.
I look forward to bringing you the 3 questions webcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And to receive a notification of when our latest webcast has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meetwithwayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.